Get in, chop.
I'm a bit self-aware. Sometimes it's fucked up, but life is gonna lie. So I ain't gonna slow up. I'm on a mission to change the face of mental health. Kicking knowledge to my people, cause you know that health is wealth. It's your lucky day, cause you tuned into the greatest. Out here striving to survive. Sometimes we fake it till we make it. If your mental health is slipping, then please don't touch that dial. Go and grab a cup of tea, cause we gon' be here for a while. Therapy is cool, but you gotta do the work. Stop living in the past, even though I know it hurts.
Yo, what's up, you guys? It's your girl, Trudy LPC, and thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Self-Aware and Up podcast. So today, this episode is really personal for me. Today is actually really, really personal and very meaningful to me because today marks 20 years since my grandmother, my great-grandmother, Carrie Ophelia Boykin, passed away. For many of you guys who have been following my stories over the years, you know that I was raised by my great-grandmother, my paternal great-grandmother, as well as my paternal great-aunt. And growing up, my grandmother was like the center of my life. She was the most important person in my life. We shared a room together. She was just someone that really swooped in to really make sure that my life looked a certain way. And my aunt also was a really, really big part of that. But with my grandmother, it was just always a very different relationship. So I lost my grandmother on July the 1st, 2006. And again, today marks the 20th anniversary of her loss. And you would think that at this point and stage in my life, that would not be something that still weighs or carries itself with me on a day-to-day basis. But there are very few days that go by in my life, even 20 years later, where I don't think about her. I don't think about what my life would be like if she were still here. And so there's so many different things. I know that I see so many people lose people just day to day in life, on social media, friendships. And then as a therapist working with clients as they navigate through these losses. But I've always had this loss that has been the center of what guided me when it came to grief. So this episode is not about getting over your loved one. It's not about getting over your grief, because grief, as we know, it comes in waves. There's so many things that happen to us when our bodies kind of go through this loss. Our bodies keep score. Even though this loss was 20 years ago, I'm finding that this year so much is coming up for me. I've been processing through a lot of it in my EMDR journey, and it's really opened my eyes to some things, because even though it's been so long, there's still so much of her that is with me on a day-to-day basis. So we're just going to dive in a little bit into what that part of my journey looks like. So when I lost her, I did not think that my life could continue. Now, mind you, over the last year I've been going through EMDR, where I was really processing the fact that my fear of losing my great-grandmother started at a very young age. It started because my grandmother was in her 60s when she actually started raising me. And so for me, she was already close to death's door, right? She was someone who had lived over half of her life at that point. And she's taking in this little baby, and she's learning to kind of reparent me after she's raised her children, after she's raised my dad. So my grandmother, she was just really, really important to my life. And so learning to get prepared for her loss, I asked God, I remember praying to God at a very young age, God, please make sure that when this lady leaves this earth, make sure that I'm ready. Make sure that I have all the tools that I need to be able to survive and thrive without her. And I definitely don't know if God kept all of his promise, but what I do know is I had to learn to live this life in a very different way as a 23-year-old trying to navigate through life without the person that was my everything. I still grieve her loss even to this very day. And so before we dive into more about what that loss looked like, I just want to share a little bit about who my grandmother was, because I feel like we get through grief best when we tell our stories. especially within the Black community, because our stories are very healing. In general, within our community, we like to laugh. We are very morbid people, but it's just because we've gone through so much struggle to the point that we have had to learn to live life and find humor in even the darkest shit. So my great grandmother, I called her Granny. There are so many people in my family that loved her. She was very well known for her cooking, for her pound cake specifically. People love my grandmother's pound cake. I have a lot of childhood friends that will come through and they'll be like, you remember when your grandmother used to sell those hot dogs? And I'm like, girl, listen, I didn't even like hot dogs like that. You can't even get me to eat a boiled hot dog to this very day. But my grandmother was known throughout the area that I grew up in. She was originally born out in Glenn, Georgia, Franklin, Georgia, Denver, whatever y'all want to call it. She was born out there in the country, and she had a very interesting upbringing. My grandmother she was a part of a very big family, and that family dynamic was something that she really, really instilled in me because she was very close to her siblings that were still alive. My grandmother had siblings that still lived in Franklin, my Uncle Frank, my Uncle Oscar, who lived up in Ohio. And again, my grandmother's siblings have all gone on, but I still remember so much of her life and so much of how she carried herself. I think that is the thing that has stuck with me so much over time because she was so loved. I called her Granny, as I said, and I have a cousin, my cousin Sabrina. She used to call my grandmother Conophilia. I was like, I don't know what this is. I remember watching Poetic Justice as a child and hearing Tupac's character call the guy at the fake family reunion that they pulled up to Cousin Pete. And that was kind of how my grandmother was referred to within the family, Conophilia, whether it was Grandma Ophelia for some. But for the most part, she was just, Miss Carrie. She was well known within the church family. Love my grandmother's spirit because she was just very, very loving. There were so many people that were drawn to her because of her energy. And so she taught me so much over the years. I live my life to this very day by principles that she taught me. One of the golden rules that many people forget about, which is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And that's something that I live by within my life every single day. I try to treat people the way that I want to be treated. And some people might debate that with me. A lot of people consider me to be an asshole. So a lot of people consider me to be a lot of different things. And I'm the villain in some people's story. But at the core, at the true essence of who I am, I carry her spirit with me. She taught me so much about just how to live life and how to love on people. And so that's what I carry with me day to day. I have so many childhood memories that I'm not so fond of. Because me and my grandmother went through a really rough period of time where I felt like, okay, well, do you really love me? Or am I just here? I struggled a little bit with not feeling like my grandmother loved me as much as she loved my other siblings, especially my brother. That was a big point of contention for me growing up because my grandmother, while she was a great woman, she was very meek and mild-mannered. I sometimes didn't feel that love. And, that may have had less to do with her and more to do with just my own shit of dealing with abandonment from my parents. But at the end of the day, she showed up for me over and over and over again. And I really appreciate the essence of who she is because she still lives in me after all of these years. She was very funny. I enjoy right now watching so many of the skits that Bay Boss Braids, I may be messing up her name, but she does a lot of skits with May Pearl and Willie Mae, and she got her daughter in there. She plays all these characters. And that experience has reminded me so much of watching my grandmother as a kid and watching her have a relationship with her best friend at the time, Miss Annie Mae, one of our cousins from out in the country as well. And just seeing Miss Jewel may they all rest in peace. Those sketches really take me back, and they've been very healing for me to listen to them and see them because they really, really take me back to what it was like having my grandmother Earthside. And so she just really just was a phenomenal woman. My love for travel even comes from my grandmother. When I was a kid, my grandmother, once a year, she would go on a trip with this Golden Age club that she was a member of. And they would just go on cruises. They would go take trips down to New Orleans. I have pictures of her on the riverboat, even have a t-shirt that she brought me back when I was a really, really young baby. It had to be under one, definitely under two. And just, she brought me this t-shirt. And every time I see these t-shirts, it say, my so-and-so went to this space and all they did was bring me back this stinking t-shirt. But I have a picture of me in a t-shirt that my grandmother brought me back. And I just remember her traveling and it being something even then that I thought, oh, this is just something you can do when you get older. But it planted that seed of wanting to see the world because I saw her go. It was so miserable having her be gone for a week. Each year, each summer when they took those trips, it was really, really difficult because I didn't know what to do. Like me just being in the house with my aunt and without her, it was just really, really different. So my grandmother taught me a lot and I gave my grandmother hell. And the one thing I am appreciative of going through that season as a child where I was very rebellious, but still her loving me through that anyway. I think that is the true testament of love, being able to love someone who makes themselves unlovable. So my grandmother, she was just a blessing. She was truly an angel on earth. And so remembering her all these years later, it just really shows how great her presence was and continues to be in my life. And grief can be so heavy for so many of us, but really grief is just all about the love we have for them. It makes us remember people not by how they died, not by how we lost them, but how they lived. And I can recount the time leading up to my grandmother's death so vividly. I will never forget her getting sick early that year, January 2006. I'll never forget her going into the hospital and me being like, oh my God, what is happening? My grandmother never got sick. She never got sick. She never had any issues. And now all of a sudden this year, my grandmother gets sick. And I'm like, what the hell is this? What is really going on? Towards the end, my grandmother's voice was very low. It was very hard to hear what she was saying. And this is coming from someone who I talk to my grandmother almost every single day. And that is crazy because if you think about the life that we had when I was younger, how bad I was, how I was always getting into trouble, giving her hell, making her life hell at times. But when I got to college, our relationship changed so much. My grandmother would wake me up every morning for class. When I graduated from college, my grandmother would call me. I was working overnight at Kids Peace in Bowden, Georgia. I had to be to work at 11 o'clock. My grandmother would call me at 10 o'clock, make sure that I was up, make sure I was getting ready for work. Like this lady showed up for me. And so her, when she got to this point where she couldn't show up in that way, that's when I knew things were different. I was trying to figure my life out. I was trying to figure out, how do I live life? How am I going to be a young adult in this space? Struggling, trying to figure it out, not being able to do the things that, of course, someone who was raised by their grandmother would want to be able to do for them. But I'm struggling. I'm trying to figure this out. And then January of 2006, my world changed because there was this realization and there was a spirit of God that came to me and prepared me. Because I always ask God again, or from a very young age, please prepare me for this loss because I don't know what my life will look like. I don't even know if I can live this life without her. And so January, I get this visit from the Holy Spirit saying, this is the year that you're going to lose her. So go ahead and prepare yourself. So I knew this going in. And then she went into the hospital. And now she's going through all of these changes. I'm trying to figure out life and work and all of this because I'm in my early 20s. I'm trying to figure life out. I'm fresh out of college. I'm working these jobs here and there where I'm working in childcare and not getting home to LaGrange as often as I should. And it's not because I don't want to be there. It's because I'm broke. I don't have money to be going back and forth to LaGrange. But I made sure that I made it when I could. And I'll never forget Mother's Day of that year. I bought my grandmother a a frame that I remember on Hamilton Road. There used to be this little thing across from the money back that was there. That whole area is demolished now and looks very, very different. But there used to be this little place across the street where you could buy little trinkets. And I remember buying a little name thing with her name on it in a burgundy frame. And I remember giving that to her. I also remember having her engraved into a silver necklace. And I hate that I don't have this necklace to this day. But I remember having her picture engraved into the necklace. And I gave her that for that Mother's Day. And I remember just being there with her. Her voice was very low. She really couldn't talk like that. And I just remember us both sitting there crying because we both knew that it would be her last Mother's Day. It would be our last experience of that. And I wanted to, even though I knew she wouldn't be able to enjoy the gift that long, I wanted her to know how much I loved her and how much she meant to me in this life. And there were some hard times, even with that, where, my grandmother never wanted to be someone that had to be taken care of. And at that time, she was needing help going to the restroom. She was needing help, I had with adult diapers and helping her through some things. And that was different for her. My grandmother, her life could have probably looked a little bit different, but my grandmother, what ended up happening to her is that she ended up getting a sore on her foot and gangrene set in. And my grandmother was like, look, I am not leaving here without all of the good body parts that God gave me. So she refused to allow them to amputate her foot. And as a result of that, everything else took over. She was an able-bodied person. My grandmother was jump roping in her 70s, actually in her 80s. She was a healthy person until she wasn't. And so I remember this experience in May of 2006, going through Mother's Day, dealing with this feeling of knowing that it was almost at the end, but not knowing how close we were to the end. And then I remember her going into the hospital. And I remember, leaving work in Douglasville at the time to go down to visit her in the hospital. And she wasn't eating. She wasn't drinking anything. And she was tired. She was really, really tired. And I remember my cousin Bernard, she spoke with a whisper at the time. And I remember my cousin Bernard kind of just standing there over the bed, listening to her, really, really trying to listen to her to see what she was saying. And she didn't want any extraordinary measures. She didn't want to be resuscitated. She just wanted to be able to go naturally. And so I remember leaving LaGrange and going back to where I was staying in Douglasville with my roommate, Hope, who actually just talked to a couple of weeks ago. And I remember going back home. I was dating this person at the time, and I'd never seen the movie. I think it was The 5 Heartbeats. Could have been Temptations. I know. I take my black card. I don't know the difference between the two. But I remember seeing this movie, and there was a funeral scene there. And it hit me as I'm watching this that, wow, I am about to go through this. My grandmother is dying. She's not going to be here much longer. And I remember getting home from that person's house that night. And I remember I had a baby Nokia at the time. And I'm in bed in my apartment in Douglasville. And I get a text from my stepsister, Shay. And she's like, you all right? And she said some stupid shit like young blood. And I'm like, what do you mean? Because in my mind, I'm still in denial. You all right? Checking on me, for real, checking on me. And I'm like, oh, this shit is real. Everybody knows that this is happening. And so I continue to kind of move forward with my life. We go through the rest of the month of June, and my body remembers all of this vividly. Every single year, my body goes back through this cycle of, oh my God, what it was like when I got that phone call, what it was like when I was told, hey, you need to come here. And I remember this like it was yesterday because my family reunion actually is this upcoming, actually starts tomorrow, the 2nd. And in that particular year, which is crazy, 20 years later, my family reunion was starting, and it was in Atlanta that year. And I remember on that first, my brother and the whole family, they were at Zoo Atlanta. And I remember coming home that Friday before when I found out that she was being placed in hospice care. I remember coming home the Friday night, got home. I remember sleeping in my aunt's bed that night because my aunt them stayed at the hospice center. And then I remember getting a call that morning, very, very early that morning, because we knew based on her urine output that it was going to be time pretty soon. And so I got that call that morning, not knowing what to do, heart racing. I get in my car and I head out to LaGrange Hospice. And I go in the room, brought my Juanita Bynum CD, Morning Glory. I'll never forget that. Because the hospice it was so peaceful there. You could tell people had prayed in that space. And it was such a peaceful place. And I remember going in, popping in the Morning Glory CD and just sitting there with her, sitting there with my aunt. My aunt Cecil was there in the room. My aunt Jeanette was there in the room. And we're just sitting there. And we knew it was coming. We knew it was getting closer. And I just remember praying in my heavenly language, just really praying and telling her that it was okay. It was okay to go. And I recall as we got closer to that time frame, I recall seeing her take one of those gasping breaths, because if you've ever seen anyone die, you know that their breathing, their respiratory system starts to shut down and their breathing starts to shut down. And they're like gasping for air. And I've heard horror stories about what this looks like for other people, especially clients that have gone through situations where they've had a relative in hospice care. And I have to say that experience of seeing her transition was probably the most peaceful experience of a death that I've ever encountered. The music playing, the Spirit of God in the room, prayer being there with her and seeing her take her last breath. And then I remember my aunt Jeannie falling and, she's crying. She's like, don't go. Because she kept kind of going back and forth. It's okay. It's okay. Don't go. Don't go. Again, this is imprinted in my brain. I remember it like it was yesterday, even though it was 20 years ago today. And I remember my aunt Cecil telling me after we thought that the last breath was taken, that she looked and she saw her take one last breath before she was gone. And I remember leaving that hospice. I remember going, calling the people in my life, telling them, she's gone. It was a beautiful transition because it was. Her transition was so beautiful, it was so meaningful. So losing her and now figuring out, okay, well, what am I supposed to do now? Remember going to Atlanta, driving to do Atlanta. And mind you guys, this is before GPS. So it was just like MapQuest to pick my brother up. And I remember him not being, in a space to come. And so that day, it changed the course of my life. I went from being this 23-year-old girl to having to become this 23-year-old woman that had to figure out, now what does this look like? I remember July the 4th. I hated July the 4th after my grandmother passed because that was the day we went to pick out her casket. That was the day we went to make sure she had that white suit that she went home in. So much of my life looked differently. So there was a lot of denial that I experienced during that time frame, even though as I talk about it now, it's it really resonates with me differently. But there was so many things about that changed for me forever. And as I think about it, all of these years later, I had a lot of feelings, but at the core of those feelings, it really boiled down to this woman changed my life. I would not be who I am as a person. I would not be who I am as a therapist. I would not exist in this realm without the influence of that lady. And so even though those emotions started to hit me really, really hard this year, I don't know why, because like the last several years, I've been in therapy for years. Usually I would have a session booked with Alex on the 1st just to be ready, to be prepared. for this type of transition within my life. And now, even to this day, I don't work on July the 1st. I honor it as a day of reverence because it's the day that my life changed forever. And I made my peace with it because it was such a peaceful transition. Like, how you going to be mad at God when he allowed this lady to leave in the most peaceful way, when I had the time and the chance to say goodbye? And that's the thing that feels so hurtful about the way that I lost my dad, is because I didn't get that opportunity. I didn't get a chance to really say goodbye and know that he heard me. So I went through all of these stages of grief afterwards. And I finally got to a place of acceptance. And I'm not going to lie, those first couple of years, they were hard as shit. I spent Mother's Day in bed crying. I spent July the 1st in bed crying. Hell, I'm probably in bed crying right now as you're listening to this. But what I do know is without her loss, without her influence, I don't think I would exist in this space, in this way. I don't think I would be able to help others the way that I do, because I understand what it's like to lose the most important person in the world and still have to keep thriving and still have to keep surviving. And so if you're out there and you're going through something like this, if you lost a grandparent, if you lost a parent, if you lost anybody important to you, just know that healing is not a linear thing. Grief is not a linear thing. It takes time. And as I sit here, and the fact that I made it through this episode without breaking down, boohoo, crying, I think that speaks to the fact that God does heal. They say weeping endures for a night, joy comes in the morning. But God heals. Over time, it does get better. You never get over it, but you can get through it. So keep getting through it. Do the things that you need to do to keep your mind in a good place. Develop a healthy routine. Make sure that you surround yourself by people that love you. Make sure that you're doing things to honor your loved one. I know today I'm going to go and get me a good meal that represents something that she enjoyed. But find ways to celebrate their life and make sure that you live their legacy in a place where they're proud to look for you. I know that they say in the Bible, the dead has no knowledge of the living. Well, I don't live strictly by the biblical principles. I believe in the universe. I believe in the ancestors. And I believe that my grandmother is very proud of the woman that I've become. I wish she were here so that I could love on her the way that she deserves to be loved on when I wasn't in a position to be able to do so. So if you're grieving someone today, I hope that you just know that there's nothing wrong with taking that space to grieve. There's nothing wrong with crying. There's nothing wrong with seeing a therapist. There's nothing wrong with journaling through your grief journey. I recommend sometimes for people to write goodbye letters. Say the things that you missed. I had to do that with my dad last year. But really give yourself permission. There's no right way to grieve. There's no wrong way to grieve. I encourage you to not self-medicate. Make sure that you take the time to really think and process through your loss, because loss changes us. It changes our brain chemistry. It changes sometimes who we are. So grief is not, it's not about beating yourself up. It's about giving yourself permission to love them even after they're no longer here. I love my grandmother with all of my heart. There's a picture of her that sits in my office. It's not out for me to see every day, but I know it's there. There's a picture of her at my bedside, in my bedside table. She's with me always. And I will continue to carry her spirit with me until the day that I lose breath in my body. I am forever changed. Granny, I love you. I will always love you. You have been the sunshine. You are the person and the thing that keeps me going every single day. I would not be who I am. There would be no Tree, the LPC. There will be no Sandtrice Russell. There will be no me without the life and legacy of Miss Carrie Ophelia Boykin. I love you, baby. Keep resting. And for those that are listening, honor your loved ones. Take care of yourselves. Also, follow me, Tree the LPC, on all social media platforms under the handle Tree the LPC. Until next time, be safe, be well, and take care of your motherfucking mental health.
I'm a bit self-aware. Sometimes it's fucked up, but life is gonna lie. So I ain't gonna slow up. I'm on a mission to change the face of mental health. Kicking knowledge to my people, cause you know that health is wealth.